Our special guest has just arrived on the scene there. And why don't I just take a minute or 12 here just to try and put some of his credentials out here. Johnny Mouradian played on the Junior A St. Catharines team from 1970 to 73 while attending Ithaca College. He played both hockey and field lacrosse. At Ithaca, he excelled at field game as a captain and all-star attack man. In 74, he was one of only 3 Canadians playing field lacrosse in the U.S. Mouradian played on the Canadian national field lacrosse team, winning the bronze in the 1974 World Championships in Melbourne, Australia, and the 78 team that won the gold medal in Manchester, England. After returning, he played major lacrosse for Brampton, hence us all getting Brampton jerseys up and around. Mike's got his on his door. Sean's got his behind it. I got mine on. He also played with Niagara and the Oshawa Blue Knights field clubs through the 1980s, winning 4 Ontario championships. Mouradian's National Lacrosse League experience as a general manager dates back to 1992 with the expansion Buffalo Bandits. In 92, the team that he built won the NLL Champions Cup. In its inaugural season under his management, Buffalo set records for winning that remain intact today, including the longest winning streak, which was 22 games, and the only team to go undefeated through the entire season in league history. That was 10-0 in 1993, winning their second championship cup and their third in 96. During his tenure as a general manager, Buffalo reached playoffs in all 6 seasons, which was 92 through 97. From 99 to 2009, Mouradian was a partner with the Toronto Rock and vice president GM for the 99 and 2000 championship seasons. The Toronto Rock won the NLL Champions Cup in 99, 2000, 2002, 2003, and 2005. From 2003 to 2009, he spent 6 seasons in various roles as GM, head coach, GM, assistant coach, managing director, GM, and president GM of the San Jose Stealth, and served as an advisor to the Washington Stealth, winning the 2010 championship. Early in 2010, he acted as a consultant for the Philadelphia Wings to develop a new lacrosse infrastructure, including coordinating and mentoring the coaching staff. He provided guidance and input in the development of the team strategy, and later that year was named the GM of the team. After serving as GM for the Philadelphia Wings, Mouradian was named GM head coach on July 25, 2011, after former coach John Tucker stepped down. After the 2013 season, he stepped down as head coach but remained the GM. He is the only general manager to win 5 championships. At this time, allow me to introduce a good friend of mine, Johnny Mouradian. Johnny, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot. It's funny.
I need to get a glass of water after all that.
You forget a lot about that stuff. I mean, because it's a long time of, just doing what you do. And the next thing you know, you're on to another different and exciting project. But, really nice listening to all your conversations about the NLL. You guys really understand the game and you really have a good handle on what's going on. And that's very cool to see. You can tell that you do your homework. You can tell that you pay attention to details and you watch a lot of the games and you talk to a lot of people, which is really, really important. So kudos to all 3 of you guys for spending a lot of time on it, because it takes a lot of time. And what's really interesting, when new coaches get into the NLL that have played, and I've witnessed it, on a number of occasions, is it's a big transition to go from playing to, showing up and, watching game film and going to practice to actually spending, the amount of time that you have to spend, to be a good coach. And there's a lot of new coaches in the NLL. There's a lot of veteran guys that, you got Kurt, last year back in Vancouver. You got Eddie, who's doing a marvelous job, and the list goes on. And then you've got some new ones. Philly is pretty new right now, right? Philly's pretty new, and you've got, Sean and his group are relatively, pretty new. And then you've got like Clarkey, who's a veteran, and it takes a while to get to that level.
Absolutely. Now, we brought you on because you had threw me an email that was about talking about the Armenian lacrosse.
Yeah.
Now, of course, my first question to you is,
Excellent.
how did you get
Nice.
involved with? That's beautiful. How do you get involved with Armenian lacrosse?
Well, first of all, you have to be Armenian,
That's
right?
good.
Like that's a prerequisite. If you're saying how do you get involved with the Haudenosaunee, well, you got to be Haudenosaunee. Or yeah, I'm Armenian. Last name ends in IAN, or Armenian names also end in YAN. And I was very fortunate. Lacrosse helped me do some things that I never would have thought I would ever do. And a good friend of mine, Father Suin, who came to our church in St. Catharines, our Armenian Orthodox church, which is like the Greek Orthodox, except it's in Armenian. And it was his first placement as a pastor. And he looked me up when I was with the Bandits, and he said, wow, you're a lacrosse guy. He was a big Toronto Maple Leaf guy, grew up in Toronto, big Leafs fan. And when he came to St. Catharines, his kids started playing lacrosse, and we became pretty good friends. And 30 years ago, we went to Armenia when Armenia first came out of, like a lot of the Soviet socialist republics came out. And we stayed with a family, and it was a really tough time for the kids and the families. So, both of us being hockey and lacrosse guys, we said, hey, at some point, we'd really like to bring lacrosse, to Armenia. And we had talked about it over the years. And Father Suin, about 10 or 11 years ago, he had some really serious health issues, and it took him a year. He had to have a heart transplant. God bless him.
Right.
And so he finally had his heart transplant at Tufts. And after 5.5 years, he was able to travel, and he went back to Armenia. He's been there for maybe, 6 or 7 times over, his lifespan. But he went back in 2022. Once he was able to travel with his new heart, and he came back and he goes, let's do it. I'm ready. I'm healthy. I can travel. I built some nice relationships there. And so fall of 2022, we started working on it, and we raised some money. We ran some camps and clinics in 2023, and then built some nice relationships. Went back in 2024 and ran some camps and clinics, and we hired a director in Armenia, and we're working with some really good nonprofits there. Goals, which is a soccer Girls of Armenian Leadership Sport. We've worked with Co-op Children of Armenia Fund. We've worked with IO, which means yes in Armenian, and they raised a lot of money for projects. And now here we are, ready to compete. We took a team to Greece. I don't know whether you saw that or not.
Yeah, I did. Finished second in that. Yeah, that's pretty astounding.
Yeah, we took a team to Greece and played in a friendly tournament October 19th and 20th. Now that's with diaspora players, right? Like one Canadian and 12 American high school, college, post-college, Armenian, Canadian, Armenian American lacrosse players. And it's been a really fun time. We put in our application a number of weeks ago to World Lacrosse, and last Wednesday, the World Lacrosse Development Committee met, and they reviewed our application, and they approved it unanimously. Now it goes to the board. It's probably already there. The board of World Lacrosse will approve it, just because the development committee does all the vetting, right? So if they vet it and they send it to the board, they know that they did their due diligence. And, they did come back with questions on some things. But once the World Lacrosse Board votes in favor, we suspect that will happen, then it goes to the full members of World Lacrosse for a vote. And we should be announced at some point in the near future as the 93rd member of World Lacrosse, which is
fantastic.
Which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I'd say.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's great to hear.
From a dream of 30 years to things actually coming to fruition a year and a half ago, to being part of World Lacrosse, that's incredible. That's a whirlwind, really.
Yeah,
it's
you know what?
To have the idea. It's another thing to put it into things that go.
That's, in all honesty, that's what happens to me in lacrosse. It's always a whirlwind of something, and it just I don't know. You know, it worked out really well, and you know, Father Suin, you know, God bless him. He's listen, when people call Father Suin, when Father Suin calls, people call him back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's Father Suin, right?
Right.
You're gonna call it.
Yep.
Like I call, they'll call me back when they have time. Right. So it's a different story.
The funny thing is, though, you know, it's your MO. You're there at the beginning of everything. You know, you're there for the beginning of the Bandits. You're there for the beginning of the Rock. Now with Armenian lacrosse, you're there for the beginning of that program and building it. That is your purpose, it seems, is you are the blueprint guy and the guy who's going to muck it up and get it going and get it built.
Yeah,
that's a heck of a
the good Lord works wonders, and thank heavens I have a wife who really, you know, is supportive, and you know, all this doesn't happen, and you guys know this, unless you can raise money, right? Like you have to raise money, and our families, our friends and donors have been spectacular in supporting the programs that we've put together the last couple of years. And you know, we've invested in a website. You know, we've hired like I said, a director in Armenia. You know, we have a gal that in Armenia that runs our social media, and so that doesn't happen unless you raise money and people believe in what you're doing, and investing into the future of it. It's all about social impact right now in countries like Armenia and a lot of other countries. You know, what we will do in Armenia or even with national teams, you know, it's going to have a social impact on kids in Armenia that, you know, team sports are just really getting going. You know, basketball is going now. You know, girls soccer has been going for about 10 years, but it's been mostly individual sports, you know, wrestling. And keep in mind, Armenians' national sport is chess. I'm sure you guys do that, play chess a lot in your spare time in between like quarters of NLL games, right? You sort of like get online and play chess with each other.
I hit the clock and I come back 3 days later.
Yes, exactly. But and you know what I think the other really cool part of it, guys, is sixes in my mind's eye is a great part of lacrosse that I think really needed to come for countries like Armenia. We couldn't begin to go to Armenia and teach face-off specialists and go to Armenian long stick and long stick middies, and but in right now in the diaspora in Canada and the USA, we've identified 52 Canadian and Armenian heritage lacrosse players that are playing in high school, college, or post-college. And that's going to be obviously the foundation of our sixes national teams. And we've got about 16 women that are playing, which would be the nucleus of our women's sixes team. We're going to really focus on sixes, obviously.
Right.
But we would really like to take a men's team to the European field championships in July, this coming July 2025. And then, of course, we'll be waiting for the Olympic Committee to communicate to World Lacrosse how many teams will be competing, how many members, how many nations will be competing in 2028. It could be 6, could be 8, it could be 10. We really don't know that. And once World Lacrosse understands that, then what they're going to do is they're going to reach out to the membership. There's 4 geographical areas, correct?
Yep.
Where, the 93 nations are from. We're going to compete in the European Lacrosse Federation, which is really easy to travel from Armenia and to Armenia. So once they figure out what that looks like, then we're going to be going to tournaments and, trying to get one of those spots to see if we can make it.
Right. Now, building these teams, especially the sixes team, you've already talked about you don't have to worry about the face-off guy, which is true. It's finding a goalie to be peppered with so many shots. I find it astounding that with a net that big and a field is not so big, that this works healthily for your goalie, and for any of these guys.
Well, you're absolutely right, and we are fortunate. When we went to Greece, we have Zach Carrion, who's an 18-year-old. He graduated from high school. He played. And we've got another goalie that played college. He was at Syracuse for 3 years. And he's 25 now. And we've got another goalie who is, going to be his fiance is Armenian. So we do have like 3 goalies that have experience, which is huge. Now, listen, when I was in the NLL, they used to call me a goalie snob because I always, and with Les, wherever we were, Buffalo or Toronto, we always spent a lot of time on getting goalies. And you guys were talking about goaltending earlier, right? Yeah. You win championships with goaltending, and that, whether it's hockey, whether it's lacrosse, whether it's quarterback in football. I mean, you look at that, and we've always had and pride ourselves on getting the best goalies. And why has Buffalo been successful? Why were we successful with the Bandits back in the day? Why were we successful? We had Whipper Watson, in Toronto back with the Rock, and you win those 1-goal games, 2-goal games with goaltending. That's a matter of fact, and you've got to get that. So we do have 3 goalies, which is great. Notwithstanding that, I was a hockey goalie. I wouldn't stand in that goal with no pads, for crying out loud. Would you?
7 meters away,
especially in practice and in warm up, right? I mean, like, whoa. But that's a different breed. Field goalies are a different breed. And what's really interesting about it is years ago, Teddy Sawicki was the only Canadian goalie that I knew that played. He was a hockey goalie, he was a field goalie, and he was a box goalie. Now there's field and box goalies, right?
Yep.
Canadians.
Yeah.
Right.
Dobson is one, right?
Yep. Dylan Ward's another.
Yeah, Dylan Ward was another. And then Sal Lacasio, who played back in the day for New York, he was a field goalie first and then played box, and he's in the Hall of Fame. He's in the Hall of Fame as a field goalie that learned box. So yeah, goaltending is the key, no doubt about that.
Right. Now I was talking with Randy Mearns a couple of weeks ago, and we were bringing up sixes, and again we were talking about net size, and he's for the 6x6 nets. I was trying to think of doing 4x4, and he brought up a point that I never thought about. Is in a 4x4 net where guys have to hone in on such a small target, these poor goalies are going to be in for target practice.
Mm-hmm.
So a 6x6 net, we may have 36 to 34 scores, but it might be more for the safety of the goalie at that, because they're trying to pick corners, not trying to pick the goalie.
Yeah. When we were in Greece, and by the way, when we were in Greece in October, that was the first time that I ever coached sixes. Mm-hmm. So I learned a lot. I mean, I've watched a little bit of it, but it's just really starting to develop. And we were like 21-18 were the scores, right? But goalies were making saves, like they were making saves, but then you also had shots that were pretty much slam dunks, right? Because you're not sliding, right? You're not sliding and hitting. It's there's no cross checking. There's checking on the hip, and I think that I agree that the 6x6 is the way to go. But I also think that at some point it might have to be a little bit more. And I've talked to some people about this, is they might have to add a little bit more physicality, not over physicality, like not a cross check, but just there's got to be something that you can do. Especially, if you slide, you can't hit the guy, right? Because there's no body checking. So, and I think they're going to figure that out. We've got 3 years to figure that out. The PLL is doing some sixes. The countries are doing some sixes. So I'm sure they'll, like any form of lacrosse or any sport, you're going to have a rules committee that's pretty well knowledgeable, that are going to they'll make some adjustments, which they have to. I mean, every year, in box, NLL, I was on the rules committee. We made different rules and adjusted rules every year, for crying out loud. But I do like the fact that there's no face-offs. I do like the fact that when a goal is scored, you pick the ball up and you play. I do like, if you miss the net, you miss the net. Like, you don't need to dive to the end line, to see who gets the ball.
Right. Now, you talked about a little bit about women. I think that's probably a better thing of an even par, since nobody has really done anything with the women's program yet, and it's up and coming. As we saw in the Worlds, the women's box is just fantastic, given an opportunity. And women's sixes, there's only been a few little tournaments here and there. So more or less everybody's on the same ground getting their program started. So are you spending as much time working towards with the women's program as you are with the guys?
Yeah. We actually have a Armenian gal, Morgan Radner, who is a D2 coach at Northwood in Michigan. She's Armenian, and she's our sixes coach for women. Mm-hmm. And one of she has an Armenian gal on that team, so she's really engaged in that whole process. And we have to have equality with women. Like, I mean, we want to have a women's team, sixes, and a men's, and a U26s men and U26s women as well. One area is different with Armenia, with the women and the men guys, is, if you have an Armenian passport, you have to do 2 years of military, compulsory military. So, we've got to work through that, on the men's side, where the women, they don't. So that is going to, be a little bit more of a balancing act. But to your point, yeah, we're spending some time developing the women and researching who's out there that maybe is playing field hockey, an Armenian gal that's played field hockey or basketball now, that played lacrosse, when she was 12 or 13, but could still pick up a stick, right? Mm-hmm. It's like the hockey guy in Canada that played lacrosse and hockey. Then he said, okay, I'm not playing lacrosse anymore. And 5 years later, he grabs his lacrosse stick, or 2 years later, he can still play lacrosse, right?
Yep.
So
exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Now, here comes to the word funding. You mentioned, of course, money is what drives everything. How are you guys getting funded? Is it coming from the country itself, or are you taking donations? How do people help? What's going on money-wise for this?
Yeah, so we were able to work with Girls of Armenian Leadership Sport in Armenia, and they provided us a portal for our summer programs the last couple of years. And the other nonprofit that helped us our first year, COAF, Children of Armenia Fund. I mean, they raise 10, 12 million a year to build schools and things in Armenia. They provided us a portal so our donors could use it, because we don't have a nonprofit yet. We're
Right.
working on it right now. And then Father Suin's church in Rhode Island, they're a nonprofit, so we were able to raise funds. So right now, we've got a committee of some dads, lacrosse Armenian dads, that are working. And so in the new year, we're probably going to have our own nonprofit. It might take 4, 5, 6 months, but in 2025, we will have our own, which
Right.
is the way you have to go. And of course, you know, we want to fund as much as we can, right? Like we would really, our goal is to fund. We made a commitment to Armenia Goals, our strategic partner there, that we will raise all the money for all the programs.
Right.
And then our other goal is to fund the Sixes programs through fundraising. So we're not counting on the Armenian government for anything because we're still a ways away from, meeting at the high level with them and working with the Olympic Committee in Armenia. But our first step was to be recognized by World Lacrosse.
Sure.
Now that we're that, now we could. And our board has 5 members: Father Suin, myself, and then 2 women, Sarah Stites, Kenny Avakian, who is the CEO of Goals. Sarah runs IO, which is a fundraiser, and Hago Bedros. They're all in Armenia. So our board right now, out of 5, 3 are in Armenia, which is where you have to be, because you've got to be in the country to really make an impact. You really got to be in the country. And we're developing youth programs. We've got 9 coaches certified that are in their communities starting youth lacrosse, co-ed, girls and boys with a softball. And World Lacrosse has donated some goals for us to get started and some sticks and balls. But the first year we bought 300 sticks from Good Sticks in the Czech Republic. Like, we paid the sticks and we brought them in. So yeah, we've had almost 1,000 kids touch a lacrosse stick and ball for a short period of time, from an hour to 2 hours to 2 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the interesting thing here, and I've dealt a lot with the Netherlands and watched them, and of course Neil Palace and Wayne Colley are old friends of mine. And the biggest thing that they ran into is they had to get somebody who was on the ground in the Netherlands to be their coach, since they couldn't go back and forth all the time. Obviously, you have people there because there's no way you're going back and forth continuously to Armenia, back to the US, back to Armenia, back to Canada, and doing all that. That's just that's more time in the air than there is on the ground.
Yeah. Well, that's why we certified 9 coaches already. Like, we put together a program with World Lacrosse and developed as Armenia level 1 certification. So we spent 2 days with them. And what we did is to build our vertical, and that's a great question, by the way, Gary. To build our vertical, we certified all those 9 coaches as coaches and referees.
Okay.
So that when they're not coaching, when they're playing, then they're going to be able to referee. And so it's not like we're going to have, they're the referees. Oh no, we're the coaches. No, we're all referees and we're all coaches. And that's the nice part about Sixes, because it's a lot easier. And you have, as a coach, you have to know the rules anyways.
Right.
I mean, you have to know the rules.
So, yeah, you answered my next question, because I was going to talk to you about reffing and where you're getting your refs from. But yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Also stops a lot of arguments between refs and coaches when they have an understanding of each other.
Well, and it's totally a respect thing, right? Like, you go, because like I'm coaching against you, and then I'm refereeing against you, and then so what are you going to argue about, right? You're not going to argue. You're going to be able to just sort it out, because you're in it together, and you're going to build the vertical.
Absolutely. And you're saying that World Lacrosse will have this vote, and you'll be the 93rd member, which is fantastic.
Yeah. We're really excited, and I think the cool part about all of this is I'm Armenian. Father Suin's Armenian. There's a lot of Armenians around that are eager to help, and that's the really important part of it, because like we're not going to, we've got to hand this over to people in Armenia. Like they're going to have to run it. Now, our national teams still for a long time will be heavily diaspora, just like some of the other teams, although like Japan now, I mean, they got kids from Japan at US colleges, 20 years now it's taken them, and they're good. The Netherlands is less diaspora players than, they're in the Netherlands, right? And unless you're like, box is a total different animal though, right? We all know that. Like you've got to have someone that understands it. And I don't know whether we're ever going to play box in the near future, with the Armenian, team, but sixes and field is where we're going to be.
Right. It's also having the, a lot of countries have that issue of not many have the hockey arenas available to it. So have to build the outside floors and things like that. So fields work just nice, and there's a lot of them. So you can
and hockey in Armenia is starting again. It's had a couple of starts, and it's starting again. But there's only one rink in Armenia,
right?
Yeah.
Well, as it picks up, I'm sure there'll be more in the docket, and then of course box can take its shape, but that's down the road some.
Yeah. Well, that's like when
not putting too many tentacles in things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Keep it simple. The other thing is, it's like a few years ago, I was helping the Costa Rican national box team, and like we went there to practice, and they didn't have a box, so you're practicing outside. And so some of my buddies said, "So you're coaching the Costa Rican box team? Is that like coaching the Jamaican sled team?" Right? I said, pretty much. Like they don't have a rink, and Jamaica doesn't have snow, right? The bobsled team. So pretty much. So to your point, yeah, like sixes is great. Like I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and look at all the different countries it can be inclusive to that would normally not be included in anything. So that's great for the game in its own right, because look at all the extra eyes. Yeah, that's the big thing for all of us. What we're talking about is to get another 280 countries to take a look at it.
Yeah,
and then go, wow.
Yeah, so. And where Armenia is geographically, so there's Turkey to the west, Georgia to the north, and the Black Sea, and Iran to the south, and Azerbaijan to the east. So Iran has a program, and so what we're really looking at in a parallel path is to be able to have, I'm going to say this as national team A, which would be diaspora players.
Right.
And then national team A, Armenia, right? That would be Armenian players, girls, men and women, girls and boys, that can compete like against Iran and some of the places that geographically they can go to without visas.
Right.
So Armenians need visas. Like we have 3 players we've identified and a coach. We've got an Armenian coach. We've got 3 players, a goalie who is a wrestler. We have a basketball player and a soccer player. And so that's how we're going to build our Armenian A team, is with those athletes, right? That we could say, okay, you're an athlete, here's a stick, just play and you're going to be okay. And then so they'll be able to compete. Like next year when we go to Greece, we hope it would be less diaspora players and more Armenian players from there, and sort of start to get them, playing. Because, what I've learned over the years is some of the countries have really relied on diaspora and haven't developed the youth or their men's programs. Now, when we played Bulgaria, like we had more diaspora players than anybody at that tournament in Greece. So we were just naturally going to have, more talent. But Bulgaria had, except for a couple, they were all Bulgarian lacrosse players.
Right.
and Greece as well. That it's a friendly tournament, so they want their native Greek players to play.
Mm-hmm.
The Netherlands was a little bit different. They had a combination, and that's a great program. They had 2 teams. They sent 2 teams.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really highly developed, and they're very good, very well.
It took a while for them to get there, and it's interesting that you mentioned about have different athletes in different sports because they used field hockey.
Exactly. Yeah.
The guys who did the field hockey, the athletes there, they figured they could put a lacrosse stick in them, and they already have the idea of the field, and to teach them a few things here and there, and move from that point. So that point it works very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we did with hockey and lacrosse, right? Like you look at the hockey and lacrosse, and they're pretty good complementary sports. So, field hockey and really football in Armenia, and basketball would be very, very important right now for sixes. Like the basketball, girls and boys would be really, really important. Armenian basketball has come a long way the last couple of years. There's a gentleman by the name of Rex Kamalian, and he actually used to coach. He's from LA, and he used to coach with the Raptors back in the day. And now he's an assistant coach with the Milwaukee Bucks. And so he took over the Armenian national basketball program, and he's recruited Armenian basketball players from all over the world, because there's Armenians in France that play basketball, there's Armenians in Portugal and in Russia, all over, and he's still trying to get those guys that are in Armenia that can play at that level. But there's a really big gap. So what we want to do, and one of our lacrosse players who we've identified is Haikos is his name. He's right below the national team Armenia basketball level, right? Like he's 27. He's below that, and so they're the guys and women that we want to have an opportunity, because they go, listen, you're really good in basketball. You might not make that basketball team, but geez, you could play on the Armenian lacrosse team, right?
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Why don't I throw it over to these guys? Mike, you have any questions for John?
I guess I would ask, what's a realistic projection for the Armenian lacrosse team for, say, 5 years from now? You're looking to be maybe top 10 in Europe, something along that line.
Yeah, I think if we look at the players that we have, of those over 50 that I shared with you earlier, there's some kids, like we've got there's a freshman at Rutgers. His brother is going to go to either a D1 or a high level academic, D2 school. There's 2 brothers, both left-handers. And so for sixes, they're guys that we would be very interested in. They're young. And then, we've got a player that just graduated from Cornell, Ben Ablanian, good player, right? He just graduated. He went to Greece with us. And then we also have Declan Palangian. He's 25. He played at Albany, and he was on our team that went to Greece. And his brother Nick, who's 30, played at Gordon College. We have the 2 Aslanian brothers, Chris and Pat. Chris plays in the PLL. Pat played, pro. And so they're really good ball players. So if you look at, we've got another freshman at UNC. We've got a player at Tufts. We got another freshman at Cornell now. So, I'm looking at those types of players that we have in the diaspora on the men's side. And I think we can be competitive. Where does that end up, Mike, to your point? We're going to be able to compete, put it that way, right? And then, of course, it's going to come down to, goaltending, luck, and how many posts you hit and all that kind of stuff. But I think we've got enough talent that if we look at our top 12 players, we could compete, right? We could compete. Now, if we'll find out pretty soon once we know, we play a couple of sixes tournaments against the best teams. You have to play Japan. You have to play against the best team in the Netherlands, the top 10 teams. You got to play the Haudenosaunee. You're going to be a far ways from Canada. You're going to be a far ways from the USA. But how would we match up against Israel? How would we match up against England? Right. So how would we match up against the Netherlands and the Czech Republic in that perspective? And I think we can match up with the players that we have. I think we can.
Right.
I don't want to be overconfident, but I'm just looking at the schools they play and how they contribute to their schools. But notwithstanding that, how many of them will play, right? How many of them can take the time off of work? How many of them can? And of course, we have to raise money because we're going to say, we want you to play. And by the way, it's not going to cost you anything, right? Rather than saying, we want you on our team, but you have to raise $3,000. That's a different scenario. We've all been through that. I was through that with Canada for decades, where we had to raise the money. Man, we started the World Box Championships back in the with Stan Cochran and Jimmy Calder, and we got a little money from the CLA, and then we had to raise the money, and that's why we had that standoff with the CLA a few years ago, because we just got sick and tired of having players have to raise their own money and not being able to get a nonprofit a document so that it'd be tax deductible. So our goal for our Armenian Sixes teams is to say, we're going to raise enough money so you're not going to pay. And by the way, we're going to raise enough money so you have proper insurance. We're going to raise enough money so that we're going to treat you like a high level, world-class player right from the start.
Right.
And I think that might make a difference, guys. I think that might make a difference.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
John, you got any questions for Johnny?
Yeah, I was just kind of curious too. When you're kind of first starting out, you talked about the funding and the support, especially in Armenia, where lacrosse is kind of not as popular as other sports. Did you find it kind of a hard sell right away, or were they pretty receptive to the idea in Armenia?
Yeah, well, it was that's a great question. The nonprofits we worked with, who are all about social impact in Armenia, thought it's very cool and exciting, right? So that excitement, if we were to went there by ourselves, not a chance, right? But Father Suin aligned us with the right nonprofits that have credibility in their communities and that have spent years building credibility in their communities. But the kids, like any sport, you watch the ones that they don't want the stick out of their hands, right? Like they're so if you got 50 kids at a camp, there's 12 that are just like they're in. And then there's the girls that are, okay, this is fun, but they're talking and they're fixing their hair and they're giggling and laughing, and that's fine. And then there's 2 or 3 girls that go, wow, but they're like good soccer players, good football players, right? So you really see it. And I think what's really cool about it is in other parts of the world, like Canada and the USA, we have lacrosse and we have field hockey and we have hockey. So there's only going to be a few kids that fall in love with a stick and a ball, right? Or a puck and a ball, or there's 35 million people in Canada, right? And how many people play lacrosse? 75,000, 80,000. Like it's, so let's say there's 3 million people in Armenia. Like what we're going to get a percentage, but we don't know how much of that percentage it will be. But yeah, the kids that fall in love with it, like we had kids the second year like that we're teaching them backhand passes, right? Like, and they're loving it. Yeah, they're loving it because it's like, wow, I get this ball, I can throw it over, So it's really interesting to see, and it's not for everybody. And the kids that do, like, we want to let them know that if we go to a soccer organization, we say we don't want to steal your soccer kids. We want them to be better soccer players by playing lacrosse as well, because that's really what it's like, right? You got to play 2 or 3 sports.
Right.
They play volleyball, which is a really good team sport. So this is just another option for some of these kids, and I think they're going to really like it.
Absolutely, I think so as well.
Yeah.
So what's on the docket for Johnny Mouradian upcoming? I know last week you were at the University of Florida doing some stuff with a women's program. What's upcoming for Johnny?
Yeah, so I've been working with them the last couple of years. They have a new D1 women's program, and Dr. Shelley and I have this high performance program that we started a few years ago, and we were working with Stanford University women's program. Actually, we worked with Gator at Syracuse the last couple of years, and I've been doing some stuff with some high schools. And so I got to know the assistant coach in Stanford, who is now the one of the coaches at University of South Florida. She was with Mindy McCord, the head coach up at Jacksonville, and then she took the job at Stanford. Then she came back with Mindy when Mindy went from Jacksonville to University of South Florida. So basically what I do is I just, help them with trying to look at the game a little different, and, talk about how box stuff can be, put into their field game, and help them at their prospect camps. Like they had 180 girls for 2 days.
Wow.
This past week. And by the way, sophomore girls from all over the place.
Wow.
That were in Florida for a tournament that went to University of South Florida on a recruiting trip. So what I did is in the modules that I taught, I just taught picks and screens and 2-man stuff, 2 women stuff, 2 player stuff. And then tried to, teach them to look at the game a little differently and work with the coaches. It's fun, and it's not that far away. Like we're in Florida, we're south of Tampa,
Right.
So it's like no traffic. It's an hour and 10 minutes.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and they're very nice people. They're very nice people, and I really enjoy it. It's really nice. So, I can just do some fun programs, right? And
Absolutely.
and enjoy it, and try and, change the way someone looks at the game a little bit. It's like the biggest thing with the program with girls and stuff is, they'll set a pick, but instead of going through the 2 defensive players, they actually go around them, which then the pick is nothing. It's everything's a pick and pop rather than a pick and go between, And that's a big concept for them to understand. Like you pick, but just go between those 2 defenders, create doubt. If they don't switch, if someone, then you look at it, but then again, then they tend to look for the picker right away and not going, well, no, that's okay. That's a decoy pick. It didn't work. Like you don't throw the ball, like be patient, pass it, and then look for that person that hit that pick. Right. And it's really interesting. Some of them can pick it up, and when they do, they go, "Wow, we never looked at the game that way."
Right. Sure. Of course. That's awesome, Johnny.
Yeah.
I want to thank you as always for taking the time with us. I love having you on, and I want you to promise that you're going to come back and keep us informed on what's going on with Armenian lacrosse,
Yeah.
also with the women's program as well, and what you're up to.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, guys. And, like I said earlier when I got on, like you guys spend a lot of time at the game, and, I think that's really important, and you share your knowledge, and you've got a lot of respect out there. Believe me, people are talking that you know what you're talking about rather than just talking. So kudos to you guys. Keep up the good work, Sean, Mike, and Gary, as always. Thank you so much.
It's our pleasure as always,
Thank
John.
you.
Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, guys.
Take care.